First call to order would be, are there any changes, additions to the agenda? Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay, and motion carries. We'll go right into governance process, section 4, policy GP2. We're going to report out on the, we're going to report out on the PCB update and the proposed legislation of H452. We have an update from Jonathan Garthwaite. Jonathan, you've got the floor.
I don't see him on.
Yo,
Zach, do you
I can't see everybody, so I don't know.
On there?
I'm sorry.
I see Cherry Torley.
That's I only see Sherry as the one person in the viewer.
Okay.
Caty, you want to go ahead with tell us about your testimony for H542?
I see Jonathan as a viewer.
Oh, you see Jonathan?
Yeah, he's in their
Yeah,
viewers with Sherry.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, Jonathan, I'm sorry.
Never, never land.
And Never, Never Land. All right, Jonathan, we're going to turn the floor over to you.
You're still muted, Jonathan, if you're speaking.
How about now?
Yes.
All right, here we are.
We got you.
Good evening, everyone. Launching right into PCB update. I will send you my notes for inclusion afterwards, but for this purpose, I'll just go through quickly and tell you where we stand. Internal air quality testing was completed this fall. I received an initial summary yesterday from the contractor, Fuss & O'Neill, and the DEC. Those results were generally lower than the previous round of testing. That was as expected, because that's in keeping with lower ambient air temperatures and humidity. That kind of tracks with our previous experiences. No major changes to spaces with school action level exceedances. Some spaces still show immediate action level exceedances. They did not indicate in that conversation that there's any immediate changes to how we're using the space. The spaces that are offline remain offline. The spaces that we're using temporarily under the school action level rules are still in use. The final analysis and recommendations will be provided by the Department of Environmental Conservation and Department of Health. They have to put their heads together and kind of look at what the results are, and then they'll tell us what we need to do. We should expect their final report within 30 days. That's air testing. The ECA, the Evaluation of Correction Action Alternatives, Fuss & O'Neill, the contractor that we've hired to do that, has completed the review of the impacted spaces and materials. They are currently involved in the evaluation of alternatives and estimation associated with each of those, estimate of the costs associated with each of those alternatives. We should expect to see that draft ECA. I asked that it be delivered to the board as a draft so that you all could weigh in before it became a final document, meaning you get to weigh in before the DEC gets to say whether they like it, to put it bluntly. The district is paying for it, so it's yours first. We should see that within 60 days. The APU units, the air purifier units that were installed in the high school, they put those in place about 18 months ago. Since that time, they've had no maintenance, and we can't really verify their use or runtime, et cetera. They're loud. Some of the spaces where we had immediate action levels and we vacated, they've probably run full time. At least anecdotally, those that were in offices and classrooms either got shut off or moved. So we don't really have an honest sense of what they're doing. The DEC would like to know if they work, which is a reasonable question. So they've proposed a work plan for the maintenance, filter changes, etc., to be performed by Fuss and O'Neill for a year, and for them to analyze. I'm not entirely clear on how they analyze. I think it's probably mostly a combination of air samples and analysis of the filtration units themselves. And that is subject to district approval. That just came in today. I think, Caty, you saw that. One of the unanswered questions, well, let me back up. To do that work, we really need to establish a new baseline so that we have ongoing data to determine their potential effectiveness. Right now, we can't really hang our hat on effectiveness because we can't say that they've run for X hours per day in X locations. So their work plan includes communication, labeling, all that stuff. It's subject to district approval. I don't know if anybody's had time to look at that, but one change they made in the work plan that differs from previous agreement is I had proposed that since those APU units are something that the DEC put in place, the district didn't ask for it. It's not a regulated activity. We don't have to do it, that they just pay for that directly. They're proposing that the district approve it, pay for it, and request reimbursement. I don't really have a strong feeling. We just should figure out what we're going to do with that before moving forward with that work. The last bullet point here is project costs. The ECA, that evaluation of corrective action alternatives, will provide general estimate of remediation cost pre-bid associated with each alternative. So they are working with EnviroVantage, which is a fairly large abatement contractor, paying them a little bit of money. We're going to have to give them access to the school, and they're going to go through and do kind of a thumbnail estimate of what they think each option would cost them to perform. The caveat there is we're still going to have to put that work out to bid, and the costs associated with abatement are really all over the map. They fluctuate wildly and are likely to increase dramatically over the next months and years. So it really is going to give us kind of an order of magnitude more than a number. In another swim lane, where the cost, the district has engaged a third party to estimate the replacement cost of the facility with applicable unit costs. What that means is we hired DEW, who some of you may remember did the best room remodeling. And what I said to them is, I want you to bid a job you're never going to get. Bid the high school as if you're going to replace it in kind, knowing that we would never replace it in kind. We would make changes, we would make upgrades. The reason for that is I think it's important to have a number that is kind of immune to anyone's interest. It's just, this is what that building costs as it stands compared to other current projects of similar scope, size, and type. That will give us a comparable full building replacement cost. It will also, and this might be more important down the road, give us those applicable unit costs. So we will have a square foot cost for straight replacement. If we end up learning or deciding, rather the board decides they want to do a 40% demolition, we can apply those unit costs to 40% of the building and come up with a working budget. What is not included in either of those are what I'm terming enabling costs, which is relocation, temporary measures. You know, if we need to bring in, if the decision is to take the the cafeteria and kitchen offline for some period of time, and we need to bring in temporary kitchen facilities, those costs, those enabling costs, relocation, technology, all of that stuff, it's kind of TBD based on what alternatives the board decides to pursue, as well as project phasing and timing. Obviously, there's different enabling costs associated with when we do this in the academic year and seasonally, and then different costs associated depending on how the project might ultimately be phased. So that's kind of the quick bullet point summary of where we stand with PCBs. I'll send that summary so you can include that, distribute that as you'd like. Any questions about any of that? There's a lot there.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Kevin.
Jonathan, Happy New Year. How you doing?
Happy New Year. I'm all right.
Jonathan, quick question. Being that we'll own that thumbnail observation, will we be able to use that in our RFP for the outside contractor?
Or you mean the ECA?
Yes.
So what the ECA will do, what the ECA is a document that will provide the board the suite of options that you have. It will be everything from, walk away from the building and call it a loss, to completely, demo and remodel, rebuild, to leave the materials in place and commit to forever air sampling and testing. The idea is that ECA gives you all the choices that you have about how to deal with this. Once you choose what to do, then we have to have a work plan that also gets reviewed by the DEC of what you all decide to do. When that work plan is approved, we can then put that plan out to bid.
Okay. But as you said earlier, the items that we're doing at our cost, we own, right?
Well, correct. So really, there's a couple ways to look at it. The way I choose to look at it is we're doing everything at our cost until we're reimbursed.
Right.
So we have hired Fuss and O'Neill. My signature is on that contract. So they're working for you, right?
Mhm.
That report that they provide is going to go to you all in draft form first, right? So we own that document. Whatever you decide to do, we will then kick that to the DEC. And if you decide, and I'm just, I'm not suggesting any option, but should the board decide that the most reasonable path forward is to leave these PCB contaminant materials in place and come up with a plan for quarterly sampling indefinitely and all that stuff, and whatever measures we'd also have to do, if you went that route, we'd have to do a whole suite of ventilation enhancements, and there's a bunch of stuff. If you should decide to do that, right, then we take that and say, here's what we want to do. The DEC says, okay, here's how you have to do it. So the board owns the analysis because we're paying for it to be done. The board owns the initial work plan because we'll pay for it to be created. But the DEC has the final say on how that work is executed. Right. They can't tell you what to do, but they can tell you how to do it.
Got it.
And some of that, the reimbursement depends somewhat on whether you all agree. If the board should decide to, again, I'm just pulling stuff out of the air, to demolish the whole building down to pavement and rebuild, and the DEC says, no, we think you only need to demolish half of it, they're going to suggest that the town of Hartford's on the hook for half that cost. So that's where the rubber meets the road. So I'll be, honestly, frankly, what I'm trying to do is keep ownership of the documentation and process with you all as long as possible.
Got it. That's what it sounded like. Thank you.
Are there any other questions of Jonathan?
Well, I just have one clarification question. So do we also, Jonathan, I'm just trying to make sure I understand, need to make a decision on the air purifier units and the work plan they're requesting with that?
Well, I don't think that's a board decision. And again, forgive me, this came in today. I don't think there's been a whole lot of time for anybody to look at it. That is a work plan like every other step of the way. The only, the DEC, one of the options in the ECA might include permanent installation or temporary installation of APUs in every affected area, right? What we can't do today is say with any surety whether those units have worked in our facility. So the DEC would like to kind of reset that process so we have a baseline for analysis. My position with them was great. You know, the district has an interest in understanding every option and certainly has an interest in the analysis following some scientific process, right? But it's not a regulatory requirement, and we didn't go out and buy these things. We didn't install them. We didn't maintain them. So what I had said to the DEC was, sure, you know, we'll unlock the doors. You can put them in. We'll communicate with people. We'll play our part, but you ought to pay for it. This proposal that they put in today looks very much like the ECA proposal, where they said, we'll approve the ECA, you pay for it, and we'll reimburse you. It's really, it really functionally doesn't make a whole lot of difference. You know, Caty, you received that. It was addressed to you, and I think it's something that it bears a close read, because I don't think that we want to take ownership of those units, nor do we want to be the entity that is on the hook for their efficacy.
Right. I feel like I don't want to get us into a situation where we're following this work plan that they've put out, where we're looking for reimbursement. That I'm not feeling very, you know, like I feel like some trust has been broken there.
Well, I don't think
we do this and then we're not getting reimbursed, at least not full cost, and when they put in these requirements.
I wouldn't say there's a trust broken. I would say that the DEC's position is that any measures that take place in the district are the district's initial responsibility. And from one perspective, I would not disagree. My suggestion, and that's all it is, would be that prior to signing off on the work plan, we reach out to them and say, would you consider just paying for this and running it as your own program? We're happy to host it, but it's your baby. It's not. That's very different than the ECA. The ECA is a regulatory requirement. We have to do that. Does that distinction make sense?
Yeah.
This is something.
My issue, Jonathan, is that we don't know if they've worked, and so I think we would want to make sure that they're doing something beneficial before we would, you know, basically obtain ownership and maintenance of them.
One of the reasons this came up at all is that those APUs could potentially play a part in one of the options contained within the ECA. And I made the case, I think a reasonable case, that dropping these things off for 18 months without any maintenance or oversight is not a scientific process that you all can use to make a decision. So we need to kind of reset with a baseline that says, on this date, we put this unit in this location. This is the dimensions of the unit. We need to ensure that it runs. You know, it needs to be a process. And I don't want to get too hung up on it, because I think that's a valid process, right? And I think it's good information to have. I just want to, I think the district might want to be careful about the distinction between what we pay for as a regulated requirement and what the DEC pays for because they want to know. One of the reasons that I think, you know, I think, again, I just had time to scan it. I think it's a little over $100,000 bill for the year. And that's a lot of money. But more importantly, I think we do need to maintain a distinction, particularly where we all know money's going to get tighter, about what we are owed for reimbursement. And I think we have a very, very strong case to say we are owed reimbursement for any money that we spend in compliance with a regulatory requirement. That's an easy argument to make, whether we win or not. But it's an easy argument to make. This one's a little trickier because it's not a regulatory requirement, and it is kind of a precedent. We also, you know, here's the thing: the analysis of those APU units is not holding up the ECA process. We can make a decision in the next 2 weeks, and it won't have any meaningful impact on the ECA process. So this is not a, you know, doesn't have to happen. You don't need a decision tonight.
Cool. Jonathan, just a question. when they did the air testing, for example, in the culinary arts kitchen, and we had the exhaust blowers on,
Yep.
they actually timed, those and the effect, correct?
No,
So there wasn't an on-off.
it's a,
scenario.
we did the initial air sampling and not in culinary arts. Culinary arts was so high, we just vacated.
No, right.
The kitchen in the cafeteria originally had an immediate action level that would have shut it down. And what we said was, unlike anywhere else in the building, because of the equipment in that space, we have the ability to just exhaust, to change the air in that space dozens and dozens of times a day. Can we do that and retest so that we can keep our kitchen running and keep feeding kids? That's what we did.
Okay.
It did in fact drop it from the immediate action level to the school action level, and that's why we've been able to keep using it.
Yep.
But in fairness, I can say there is a correlation between running that exhaust fan 24/7 and the lower air results. That just makes sense.
Right.
We don't have any kind of measurement of air exchanges or velocities or run times or any of that.
Right.
We also, the elephant in the room is we can exhaust the air, 400 times a day. It doesn't change the fact that the source contaminant materials remain in that space.
Right. It's still there.
Yeah. If somebody throws a switch or blows a fuse, our levels will go back up.
Exactly. Got it.
And the same is true with those APU units.
Well, that was the correlation.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions for Jonathan or any more comments? Jonathan, thank you. We appreciate it.
Sure. Do you want me to hang on for any other facilities topics or public commentary? Is that Caty nodding yes? Okay. All right.
Please. Thank you.
All right.
Caty, we're going to turn that floor over to you and ask for you to tell us about H542 and the testimony that you gave.
Heidi has
Please.
her hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see that.
You can probably wait till public comments, I think.
I can allow them to speak right now if you guys want.
Heidi, can you wait till public comment? I'm sorry, I can't see, so I don't know what's going on.
I mean, she won't be able to do anything, I think, other than raise her hand since she's a viewer. So.
Okay. Heidi, I'm going to ask if you would wait till public comment, please. And then we'll put you first on. I appreciate it. Thank you. Caty?
Sure. Zach, I see you have my presentation up and running, so I'll just give you, I'll prompt you to advance the slides, which you can do right now to our second slide. Thank you. I was asked to provide testimony last Friday, January 16th, to the House Education Committee. H542 is a bill that is being proposed by Representative Peter Conlon, who's also the House Education Committee chair. The short and long of it is that the proposed bill would end PCB testing in the state and would require the state to allocate funds toward abatement and remediation of facilities that have already been identified as exceeding the state's threshold of PCB contamination. So those are the main kind of tenets of the proposed bill. And you can advance the slide, please. So why was I asked to provide testimony? I was one of 6 superintendents who was asked to provide testimony and was invited by Representative Conlon to do so before the House Ed Committee. The committee wanted to hear from us who have been facing this ongoing challenge of being identified as a district that needs to address PCBs. And so I think there were actually a number of us asked, and 6 of us were there to provide testimony. Next slide, please. So the information that the committee was looking for was to, first understand the status of PCB testing and remediation in the district. Then to understand what is the state paying for versus what the district is incurring locally. And then, what we've been told by the state in as far as what we can expect to be funded in the future. Next slide, please. So some of the information that I shared with the committee, I did a bit. This was my second time testifying. I testified once last year, but I did want to remind the committee members of our specific situation here in Hartford. So I did provide a little bit of context. I reminded them that we still have 3 HACTC programs that are in different spaces, one of which is fully relocated off campus. I talked to them about our experience beginning the year this year at the high school, and that we had to take 12 classrooms offline right at the start of the school year. I talked to them about the ongoing challenges and the difficulty also in communicating with our community about what is happening and kind of the arbitrary nature of you can be in this space this week and not this week, and that space is adjacent to that one, but you can't be there and you can't be there. So I tried to provide them with enough context to understand our situation in Hartford, and also tried to zoom out a little bit and talk about the overall impact on the community. Another thing I did mention was just how challenging it has been at the Career and Technical Center to not be able to grow our programming more, that we were on the cusp of doubling the amount of students we would be able to admit into building trades, that also has an impact on our local community, that even the spaces that we've been able to shift on the campus have led to us having to limit our expansion of our adult ed programming, which again has impact on the community writ large, when we could be training electricians and plumbers and nurses for our local community, and we can't do that if we can't expand our programming. As well as the ongoing difficulty with culinary off campus, the loss of learning, which is about 10 hours a week because of the transportation of the students, and then of course the ongoing costs associated with that. Next slide, please. So I also talked about some of the cost estimates. I went over that we're currently in the ECA phase of our process. Many of the districts who were there were able to provide a longitudinal view of what their experience is to date, because they're further along in the process than we are. So it was kind of nice to create that timeline for folks. I talked to them about how we got a locally funded third-party estimate of Hartford High School and the HACTC, so that we'd be able to plan ahead, since we're still in process of better understanding the costs through the ECA, and that we were given an estimate of $104 million, which doesn't include, 12 to 13% layered on top for architectural or planning work, as well as another 15% for a contingency, which is really common, of course, as well. So they heard about our cost estimates and where we are on that. Please advance the slide, Zach. I spent a little time talking about a topic that I don't think has been identified enough, which is the human cost. So I spent a little time talking to the committee about how much time the humans in the district have spent on this topic, and went over, how much time Jonathan has spent, Jacob, Aron and myself, the principals, the assistant principals, the educators, and tried to humanize this topic to the best that I could as well, because that is a significant cost and has a great impact on retention of staff and appealing to educators who might wish to work in the district. So spent a bit of time on that as well, and emphasized that we're not really talking about that enough, I think, statewide. Next slide, please, Zach. And then I went over the funding that we have received to date from the state and what is still outstanding, which again is what the committee was requesting. So you can see there that I asked Jacob, thank you, Jacob, to get these numbers together for this testimony. But that, we're over $300,000 in terms of the funding that we have received to the state to date. And that current outstanding expenditures total around $135,000. So that was on the record in my testimony as well. And I also talked about just the uncertainty of the future, that even though we have been told that these costs will be taken care of, given the fact that last year we were told that the funding was running out, that there was more funding allotted last session, but I hear that it's now down to about $3 million, that we continue to live with that uncertainty. And that also has, not only a financial toll on our community, but an emotional one. Next slide, please. Lastly, I just talked about what we're hopeful for, and that ultimately our hope is that the state will follow through on its promise to fully fund PCB testing, remediation, and abatement, and ensure to all of us in our community that our schools are safe, and that our local taxpayers and all of us in the community are not unduly and financially penalized for being among an arbitrary list of schools and districts that were tested prior to the pause in testing last year. That about covers it. But if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. There's just a question slide next, Zach.
Do you have any
Does anyone
questions?
else consider the order to stop testing just kind of dumping it off on the schools? I mean, so we know that most of our schools in the state are old. We were required to test, and now they're saying, hold up, let's pause. I mean, it sounds like that they uncovered something that they want to put the lid back on, is really what it feels like. Which I get why financially, but I mean, I think we already know what situation we're in. Other schools that have not yet tested are likely facing the same issues that we are. I don't know. It just feels like it's kind of a way to put the lid back on, or Pandora's box.
I mean, I guess what I'll say is that I appreciate Representative Conlin, his what he wants to do, which through this bill, which is for those of us who've been identified, to ensure that we actually get funding toward full, remediation.
Right.
Some of the testimony that came up, it was actually a very helpful, if you have a moment, if anyone does, to watch it. Feel free to go back, but I appreciated the perspectives of many of the different superintendents who've gone through this, because one of them also highlighted what we've brought up before, what Jonathan has talked to us about, which is that Vermont, unlike the EPA, elected to choose air sampling as a way to test for PCBs, and has an exceedance level that is far lower than the EPA as well. And so, you know, they were providing that, just like we've talked about here in the district, that that's leading, you know, some schools to be identified that if we were using the EPA framework for testing and identification, we would not necessarily fall in those limits. So, you know, what I appreciate about the proposed bill is that if we're going to continue to identify more and more and more schools using this methodology and these exceedance levels, we're just going to identify more and more and more and more. And in the meantime, we're going to be in such a tough position as a community in figuring out how to pay for and address what is currently happening in our schools with these levels.
Yep. I mean, selfishly, I mean, I think we have a better chance of potentially getting the assistance that we need here if this does go through. So I think, but two sides I have on there.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if Coach, if you could provide any insight, like, is there support for the bill?
It's in that pantheon right now, and as both of you have said, you know, especially in Jeremy's point, you know, about, you know, we're part of that group, and the only way, you know, forward, you know, is to properly compensate the identified schools, you know, within the cash that we have available to do so. You know, that's the only fair way to do it, you know, and that's going to be the equity push, you know, from, you know, all of our colleagues, you know, to make sure that that happens. If that helps.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Katie. Can we go to our budget report with Jacob and Aron, please?
Thanks, Nancy. I'll actually kick this off a little bit. This will mostly be Jacob's show, since it's a lot of the work that he's done. But Jacob, we've worked a bit on these slides, but I will tell you the amount of work that has gone in to trying to make sense and make these numbers make sense to the public. I asked Jacob a lot of questions about what a lot of these things are. So this presentation really is about trying to help the community understand a little bit more about how the taxes work and does that within the school system. So Jacob.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. I'd just like to preface this by saying I am in fact not a tax professional. So this is my best take at trying to educate the public on Vermont's very complex tax system that I'm not sure all of us fully understand, but I'm going to do my best. Most of the material in these slides did come from Jake Feldman from the Department of Taxes. So I've kind of modified those for our purposes. And then I'm going to go into showing you some of like the calculator piece that I had mentioned last week, and trying to give you some examples to try and make things a little bit easier to understand for our taxpayers. So Zach, next slide, please. So how do we fund our education in Hartford? This is a nice little pie chart of the education funding sources in Hartford. And when we're talking about the education funding sources, we're talking about the ed spending that's covered by the state education tax. So when we look at the FY26 preliminary cash flow numbers, these are where the numbers came from here that I then just kind of put into this nice little chart that makes it easier to look at. 31% of residents are contributing, 53% are non-residents, and then 16% is coming from the Gen Ed fund. So that state education fund, and that is kind of the makeup of how we fund our portion of the ed spending that's covered by state education taxes. Next slide, please. So the yields are announced on the December 1st letter from the Vermont Commissioner of Taxes, and they are finalized by the legislature. There's 3 yields: the homestead property yield, the income yield, and the statewide non-homestead property rate, which we'll get into a little bit of how those affect. But essentially, they're kind of numbers that have levers about whether or not a certain tax rate goes up or down. And I know the legislature, I actually got testified yesterday before House Ways and Means regarding the yields, the impact of the yields on our budget and the budgeting process. I did include my testimony in the folder, and then if anyone is interested in watching the full session, it's available on YouTube under the House Ways and Means. It's the session from yesterday afternoon. But we'll get into that in a little bit. Next slide, please. So big picture, resident homeowners, homesteads are eligible for an income-based credit to their property tax. The income limit for eligibility is $115,400 for credits going out in the FY27. The credit is based on taxes on the house site. That's your house, and they give you up to 2 surrounding acres as your homestead from the prior property tax year and the household income from the prior calendar year. Next slide, please. So the lag or look back, credits are lagged, meaning that they're based on the prior calendar year household income and the prior fiscal year property taxes. So realistically, when we're talking about FY27 taxes, we're talking about the FY27 property taxes minus your FY26 credit is going to be the net of your FY27 taxes due. So if taxes go up a lot in FY27, households in our district will get the income-based credits that reflect that jump in FY28. So there is a little bit of a lag with the data. I know everyone's like, hey, I just retired or whatever, why am I not seeing it? Because all that information is lagged. Next slide, please. So the limits for households with an income less than 90,000, the credit covers up to the first 400,000 in equalized house site value, and taxpayers pay regular property taxes on the property value over that amount. So for households with an income greater than 90,000, the credit covers up to the first 225,000 in equalized house site value. And then of course, for households with an income less than 47,000, they're eligible for an additional adjustment, sometimes called the super circuit breaker or the homeowner rebate. The additional adjustment ensures that the educational and municipal taxes remaining after the first adjustment do not exceed set statutory percentages of household income, but the $400,000 house site limit above still applies. And just as an FYI, the maximum education credit is $5,600. Next slide, please. Thank you. So looking at the income grouping, I had Jake Feldman from Department of Taxes pull these numbers. Obviously, again, the data is a little bit lagging, but the 2024 income is the most recent data that we have. So if we're looking at kind of where people fall in Hartford as far as the income groupings, less than 47,000, we're talking about 15% of our residents that'll pay the flat 2% of their income. In the next bracket, the greater than 47,000 but less than 90,000, we're talking about 29%. That'll pay the FY27 income sensitive rate of 2.86%. When we're talking about the greater than 90,000 but less than 115,000, we're talking about 14% roughly around Hartford. Again, with the current data that we have, that'll pay a combination of the income sensitive rate and the homestead tax rate. And then when we're talking about the greater than 115.4 thousand, that's 42% of our taxpayers roughly. That'll pay the full homestead rate. So households who get an income-based credit for FY27 taxes will have it based on their 26 household income, and that credit will again, because of the lag, be applied to their FY28 tax bill. Next slide, please. So the rates, these are locked in statute, but essentially for the less than 47,000, if you're in the 0 to 9,999, that's 0.5% of your household income. If you're in the next bracket of the 10,000 to 24,999, that's 1.5% of your household income. And then finally, if you're in the 25,000 to 47,000, you're hitting that maximum 2% on the income. And then anything over the 47,000, the income rate reflects that per pupil spending, just like the homestead property rate. So again, this would be more like the income sensitive rate, that 2.86% in that next tier. Next slide, please. So I wanted to get a little bit of examples because I think it's easier when we can kind of see the math and the formulas on some of this stuff. So again, household income less than or equal to 47,000. We're talking about 2% of the income. In the example here, household income from 47,000 to 90,000. Let's say that we have a $500,000 house. Keeping in mind with that tax bracket, the maximum you're allowed is the 400,000. But because in our example we have a $500,000 house, you pay a little bit additional for that overage. So you can see here the 90,000 times the 2.86% gets you the 2,574, and then you also pay the 1,392 additional because of the additional $100,000 over on your property. So we're looking at basically taxes of 3,966 total. Now, if we talk about the next income bracket, where keep in mind, over 90,000, you're in the 225 homestead basically allowable. So if we look at our example here, we have, $110,000 income. Again, we're keeping with the $500,000 house. You get the 2.86% based on your $110,000 of income, plus the difference of your homestead, which gets us to the 6,975. Next slide, please. So again, if we go up, the next bracket, your household income over the 115.4, you're just paying the straight homestead rate, which in our case is looking like $1.392 per 100 of homestead value. And then of course the non-residential tax rate, which is just the non-homestead property rate yield that comes from the tax commissioner and is finalized by the legislature, divided by the state adjusted common level of appraisal, gets us the non-residential tax rate. So again, just want to bring up the Vermont Homestead Declaration defines your homestead as your principal dwelling and up to 2 surrounding acres. Anything over that, you're probably going to pay the homestead rate. And then the FY27 budget will be compared against the 2026 household income to calculate credits that will be applied in FY28, your FY28 tax bills. Next slide, please. So this was a nice little calculator that one of my constituents up in Montpelier, Roxbury, thank you, Mike, has shared with me just to kind of give a little bit of examples so people can kind of see at face value what they're on the hook for. So we just kind of have the income broken down a little bit by kind of the tiers. So we have an example of, 35,000, 47,000, 60,000, 90,000, the 110, and then the 115.4. And then we have the homestead value. So just a quick little chart. Again, as I always like to say, this is subject to change as the yields are not final, but this is the best information that I have available to me today. So just a quick little chart of, for those that are income sensitized, they can kind of get a good feel about what their taxes could potentially look like. And just want to point out that 44% of our Hartford residents will pay either the 2% or the 2.86% of their income for property taxes. Next slide, please. And then I just put some resources in here. The first one has some facts, tax rate explanation, rates by town. I did include the link. This is a live link of the 2026 property tax credit calculator. It's very specific to your own individual taxes and how you file. So all that information really has to come from you because it's very personal. And then I did include a link for the JFO's Ed Finance 101 with some information on the credits. So that's just kind of a brief overview in my attempt to try and make some mystery less mysterious, knowing that it's still very complex and hard to deal with. So thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Does anyone have any questions of Jacob? I appreciate the time and the work. Report out on PBGRs. AOE recommendation to the State Board of Education, potential impact. Caty, we're back to you.
Thank you. Oh, nice, Zach. You already got that up. Thank you. All right. So we are returning to a topic that we didn't get to at a previous meeting. And this is in relation to PBGRs and the impact on the HSD. So Zach, you can go to the next slide. And this is where I'm going to describe what these are for all of you. Thank you. Section 9A of Act 73 requires that the AOE recommends statewide graduation requirements to the State Board of Education. These decisions by the State Board need to be finalized by July 1st of 2027. And then the requirements go into effect beginning in the 2027-2028 school year, with impact on the graduating class of 2031. So when I'm talking about PBGRs, I'm really talking about statewide graduation requirements, also known to us who've been in Vermont education for a long time, proficiency-based graduation requirements, which is how we generally refer to them in our districts now. Zach, you can go to the next slide, please. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of context for you. Part of the reason this was included in Act 73 was to align districts in what they currently require. And the most recent bit of information available about this alignment in our state is Vermont's Portrait of a Learner, Portrait of a Graduate. So we engaged in a vision of a graduate. We invested in that process last year. And so what you will see in this Portrait of a Learner or Portrait of a Graduate that the state has put out there for a while now, it contains all of the things that our vision of a graduate contains. So transferable skills, content area standards, flexible pathways and coursework, and then of course the curriculum and instruction that provide practice, assessment, and feedback to our students. So this is what kind of grounds us now, in addition to the Common Core. But this is what the AOE looked at first in order to think about what statewide graduation requirements might look like. Another reason that the AOE was interested in this was to think about right now, if we have a student who transitions out of the Hartford school district and transitions into a different district, oftentimes there will be maybe a different number of credits that a student needs to address before they can graduate. Sometimes there are different requirements between districts, and a student might need an extra credit in English or an extra credit in social studies. So it's not consistent across the state at the moment. Next slide, please. So a little bit more context about the process that the AOE has engaged in to arrive where they have with their recommendations is they had 4 phases. They started with research and analysis, which was really looking at current SU and SD requirements and looked at those comparatives across other states as well. Then was the stakeholder engagement process. I was, as a member of the Vermont Superintendents Association, I attend monthly meetings with the secretary and also attended a conference that was based on this. I spent the duration of my day in that session that was a discussion of proficiency-based graduation requirements. The third phase, which just passed, was the AOE synthesized the feedback and they drafted a report. And then the next phase up until implementation or up until the state board has their timeline of making a decision, the AOE will be providing some support to them as they go through that recommendation. Next slide, please. So this is what was found in the research phase of the AOE's process. So right now, you'll see that there are some variation in what different districts require at the moment. So there are some districts that require 4 English credits. There are others that require 5. Some districts require 3 credits in order to graduate in math. Others require 4. So if you look down along the line, there is a number of inconsistencies, with the widest one being, world language, where some districts would refer to world language as an elective and put that in the number of electives that might be required for a student to graduate. Others distinctly have world language there. And that's true of financial literacy, and it's also true of health. So those are some different content areas that are not necessarily defined in some districts and are defined in others. Next slide, please. The other study that the AOE looked at was what some post-secondary schools require, particularly post-secondary schools in our state. So they looked at this as a comparative again to look back at what many of our schools and districts require in order to graduate and how that lines up with what even our in-house post-secondary institutions require for students in considering their applications. One caveat that I do want to point out, just in my experience as a building principal at the secondary level and working with a lot of school counselors across the state, is that this might look pretty kind of cut and dried when you look at what the colleges and post-secondary institutions are looking for in terms of ELA and math and science and social studies credit. But what isn't here is that there are a lot of electives and flexible pathways that also serve as addressing many of these credits in the eyes of these post-secondary institutions. So I wanted to point that out because it's not quite as cut and dried as it may seem in terms of that like comparative. There are many schools that have a lot of electives that have licensed educators, content area educators who are addressing specific content area standards in some of these content. And so it's a little bit difficult to say, that a school or a district is not necessarily offering these credits to students when many schools and districts, ours included, do that by embedding those standards into some of the electives that we offer. So just wanted to put that out there. Next slide, please. So what is the AOE recommending to the state board? This is a little bit difficult to see. I accessed their report directly, which I've also linked and am planning to link again in my newsletter for next month as well. But what they're recommending is 4 credits of math, 4 credits of ELA, 3 credits of social studies, 3 credits of science, a credit and a half in the arts, a credit of world language, half a credit of financial literacy, which it will be a standalone course, which matters. 2.5 credits of PE and health, and then 3 credits of electives. And again, I can provide all of this information, and this will be this presentation can also be added to the packet. But let's go to the next slide, because I want to give you an idea of how we compare in Hartford to those recommendations to the state board. So if you wouldn't mind advancing the slide, please. So how does this impact the HSD? What do we do now at the high school, and how might this impact what we do in our elementary schools and in the middle school to kind of scaffold this learning in our district? We already meet the minimum required credit. We have 26 here in Hartford High School. And as you recall in previous slide, the AOE's recommendation is for 22.5 credits. So we are well above that. What it would mean is that we would need to basically, in essence, shuffle the deck chairs here. We'd have to add a standalone financial literacy course. We'd have to add another math credit. We'd have to increase what we're doing currently in the arts by half a credit. We'd also have to increase what we're doing in health ed by another half a credit. In PE, we actually are over the amount of credits that the AOE is recommending to the state board by half a credit. So we'd actually be, we could decrease or we could keep it the same. And then world language would be shifted out of the electives category and into being a graduation requirement. So that would be an increase of 1 credit. So, what this means ultimately at the high school is that we would have to kind of reshuffle the way in which we are offering our courses, what is in the course catalog, and potentially, some of our educators. And for example, I think that applies the most in thinking about the financial literacy course, because we don't currently have a standalone financial literacy course. That content is embedded in, math classes now. So that would be a difference. But I mean, I can say that in looking at what the AOE is recommending to the State Board of Ed and looking at what we require, I don't have big concerns about our ability to meet these requirements. Instead, I think it's going to be more of an in-house conversation and thinking about how, again, we kind of shuffle the deck chairs. I think one thing that this does make me think a lot about, though, is number one, just making sure we're very clear and really explicit about how these requirements are aligned to our vision of a graduate and scaffolded in our curriculum so that this all is cohesive. And then I think about things like, we don't want our students to experience any kind of abrupt change. And so we want to make sure that if we are required to do certain things, that students are gaining exposure to some of those topics and that content before they arrive at the high school. So it will implicate some of the work we're doing to make sure that we're appropriately scaffolding this learning in our elementary, middle, and then, having it make sense and be in alignment with our high school and what is being required. So that's what I see. I don't have huge concerns about what this will look like for us and how we'll be able to kind of adhere to what is here. I guess I was more, I will say, personally in that session, more a little surprised by just how this looks pretty standard and it doesn't look very progressive in terms of the way in which we are addressing, for example, transferable skills. And a conversation we've had for a long time about how we infuse transferable skills into the learning, and kind of hold them up high as something that we know students are going to need as they leave high school and enter into the next phase of their lives. So, any questions?
No, I'm just excited to see a standalone financial literacy course. I mean, I think
Yes.
that's something that'll be very useful. You know, I joke with a lot of people that I still have never used the Pythagorean theorem, but it would have been great if I learned about APR, you know, and how to do my taxes, that kind of thing, which I've since learned. Yeah, I know that some people do use the Pythagorean theorem at their job, but I haven't yet. So no, I'm just excited to see that. I would hope that we wouldn't decrease PE, just because, you know, that's also my line of work, and I feel like that's important too. But that's it. Just my 2 cents.
I think we're, on the right path. There still is funding available from the treasurer's office and some of the money programs that are running through Champlain, because they were the pioneers in just that curriculum, altogether. And there is an interest. They actually have one person in the treasurer's office that is assigned to that duty, assisting schools with that programming. So having it in the curriculum is a really nice piece, and having a way to help our educators deliver it better is really cool too. So I would agree with Garrett, on that. Nice job, Caty.
Are there any other questions or comments on this one for Caty? Okay, Jeremy, how about we go to you and look at policy work?
Sure. So the fingerprint on
Okay,
that same date, we also warned policy B1 substitute teachers. I move to approve the policy B1 substitute teachers.
do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nay. And so it is approved.
I will get those signed and sent over. And this will also be the formal warning for policy F1 for travel reimbursement, which is in the packet.
Okay.
Which is available online.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Garrett, have you got monitoring report DS4, delegation to the superintendent?
I do. I just realized I never sent it over to anybody, but I can send it over after the meeting. So I did BSR 4, delegation to the superintendent, so prepared by me, submitted today through a direct inspection. So first part, so I'll just go ahead, just read the current policy.
Sure.
So the board will instruct the superintendent through written policies that prescribe the organizational ends to be achieved and describe organizational situations and actions to be avoided, allowing the superintendent to use any reasonable interpretation of these policies. Accordingly, number 1, the board will develop policies instructing the superintendent to achieve specified results for specified recipients at a specified cost. These policies will be developed systematically from the broadest, most general level to more defined levels and will be called ends policies. All issues that are not ends issues as defined here are means issues. 2, the board will develop policies that limit the latitude the superintendent may exercise in choosing the organizational means. These policies will be developed systematically from the broadest, most general level to more defined levels and they will be called executive limitations policies. The board will never prescribe organizational means delegated to the superintendent. 3, as long as the superintendent uses any reasonable interpretation of the board's ends and executive limitations policies, the superintendent is authorized to establish all further procedures, make all decisions, take all actions, establish all practices, and pursue all activities. Such decisions of the superintendent shall have full force and authority as if decided by the board. And then 4, the board may change its ends and executive limitations policies, thereby shifting the boundary between board and superintendent domains. By doing so, the board changes the latitude of choice given to the superintendent, but as long as any particular delegation is in place, the board will respect and support the superintendent's choices. So, my interpretation of the policy. I interpret this policy to mean that the board governs through policy, not through direct involvement in operations. Specifically, the board delegates authority to the superintendent by adopting ends policies, so defining desired outcomes, and executive limitations policies, so defining boundaries, rather than direct day-to-day actions. Any matter not explicitly defined as ends issue, as an ends issue, is considered a means issue and therefore falls within the superintendent's authority. The superintendent is empowered to act independently within a reasonable interpretation of board policy, and those decisions carry the same authority as if made by the board itself. The board retains control over delegation only by revising policy, not by intervening in administrative decisions once delegation has occurred. So compliance status. So the rubric that I guess created and used would be, first one would be board direction occurs through written ends policies. So I found that we're in compliance. The board establishes executive limitations without prescribing means, in compliance. Superintendent authorized to act within reasonable interpretation, in compliance. And then board respects delegation unless policy is formally changed. And I found that we're in substantial compliance. So next would be evidence of compliance performance. Compliance can be measured by examining board actions, agendas, minutes, and policies to determine whether the board issues direction through policy rather than instruction, refrains from prescribing operational means, and respects the superintendent's authority within established policy boundaries. So some evidence of this, the Hartford School District Policy Manual. So it includes clearly defined ends and executive limitation policies, demonstrating formal delegation of authority. Board agendas and minutes, so show that the board primarily addresses governance level matters. Superintendent monitoring reports. Administrative decisions are generally presented to the board for information or consent, not approval of means. And then the board has revised policies when necessary, rather than issuing any ad hoc directives. 5, explanation of exceptions or areas, I guess, that I found that we could use improvement. So I said, while the board largely respects the superintendent's delegated authority, the following areas suggest substantial rather than full compliance. At times, board discussion has extended into operational detail, particularly during responses to high impact issues, for example, facilities, safety, or community concerns. So these discussions have not resulted in formal directives, but they could risk blurring the boundary between governance and administration if not carefully managed. Continued attention is needed to ensure that board influence is exercised only through policy or monitoring, not informal guidance on means. And then lastly, so next steps or option for continuous improvement. So 1, board education. So periodic refreshers on policy governance rules. Agenda discipline, so using agenda framing and facilitation by the chair to keep board discussions focused on policy outcomes and monitoring rather than operational details. Policy-based adjustments, so when the board seeks different results or boundaries, pursue changes through formal policy revision, not case-by-case direction, and then ongoing monitoring. So continuing regular monitoring of the BSR policies to reinforce clarity of roles and maintain strong superintendent board alignment. And then we can just see BSR 5 outlines those. So and that's it.
Thank you very much. Do I have a motion to accept BSR4?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, nay? And the motion is approved. Okay, we will go into public comment, and I told Heidi I would let her be first.
My kid's got a hold of a recorder, so I apologize if there's any loud noises.
Is Heidi still on?
I'm here.
Yeah, she's.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
Heidi, go ahead.
1 minute, Nancy, 1 minute.
Okay.
I wrote it down so I didn't mess up, but now I got to find it. That's what happens when you put me on hold for too long, I
I'm
guess.
sorry.
You're fine. Well, maybe I'll just free float it.
Sure.
So I raised my hand tonight because of the boiler situation. By the way, I'm Heidi Due to White River Junction, Vermont,
Thanks.
for identification. I have some concerns. Let me see if I even have it in my email. I apologize. I really didn't mean to do this to you guys. I wasn't prepared. I was hoping that someone could please clarify who is taking accountability to make certain that our institution is receiving the routine maintenance it requires to run properly year round. We must be using a company to keep our school district utilized as far as our heating and cooling. And I'm just curious as to who is overseeing this, when we're overseeing this, and why, or if there was any signs that it needed repairs, maintenance, parts. We live in New England. This can't be happening. I received notification today that this was discovered last night. The school board knew about this last night, yet our children and staff went into those buildings today. I don't think any of us want to be in a building that's cold for half a day. We need to be better, more accountable and transparent about these items. And I'm just wondering when this is going to happen. I don't know. I'm not trying to point fingers. We just need to be better. Was the heating system part of the $21 million bond that was approved by the tax voters? I don't know. I can't remember what was approved in that bond. I don't even know if anything in that bond money has been even addressed. I don't even know where to find that information. I don't even know when we were updated last time. So if these answers could be given, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Jonathan, are you still on?
Yep, I am.
Would you like to respond to the?
Sure. Hi, Heidi. All reasonable questions. I'll start with the easiest answers. Our maintenance of all of our boilers is done as part of a regular PM program. We use ARC Mechanical for the lion's share of the work, both because they're local and also because they're very familiar with our facilities. All of our boilers get regular cleaning and service. That doesn't keep them from being old. The failure that we experienced today, I can't tell you exactly when it was a pump failure, a fuel pump failure, and it just broke, it just wore out. There was no indication of that. It's not something that would show up in any kind of diagnostic or preventive maintenance. It was just simply a broken connection between a pump and a motor. It happened sometime overnight. I will tell you that when it's very cold, I at home tend to look at the boilers, and I did look last night before bed, and it failed sometime during the night. So we didn't know exactly when it failed. It wasn't due to a lack of maintenance. It was simple mechanical breakdown. Now, the notification to folks, I learned about this a little bit before 6 this morning, and we had a contractor on site by 9. I don't exactly know what time I notified the superintendent, but I don't think it was much later than 6. So I think everybody who needed to know knew as soon as possible. The building temperatures that early were still holding. And I think the decision to bring students in was based on the fact that it was still holding, and the hope that we could get the pump motor repaired and up and running. Really, the most unfortunate thing about this was the timing. We have, every piece of mechanical equipment breaks down eventually from time to time. This just happened to happen in the middle of the night when it was 7 below. And that's why it was such an extraordinary event. We do maintain our boilers. We do have ARC do those cleanings. We even do, we check the boilers every day. If we identify a problem or even a potential problem, a leak, a rattle, a buzz, we either address it ourselves or bring in ARC or controls contractor to address it. I can tell you the vast number of mechanical issues get addressed before anybody ever knows it happened. We had the boiler fail, for one reason or another. We've had boilers fail during the course of a school day and nobody even knows. We restart, take whatever remedial action is required. That's kind of how we do business. This one was extraordinary. The part that we need to fix it is rare. It's an old boiler. We ordered it. It's being shipped overnight and will be in place at 10 o'clock today, at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. The boiler is currently running based in large part to the efforts of a really sharp tech from ARC who worked with me pretty much all day to come up with a creative solution to get heat back in the building. And that's what we did. So, I won't tell you that we're not going to have another breakdown or another failure. We will. I will tell you that the vast majority are dealt with without having any impact on the students or programs, that we do everything we can with the resources we have available to maintain our systems. The same priorities apply to the maintenance of those systems that apply to everything we do. First and foremost is the safety of students, faculty, and staff. After that is support of the programs. And third is kind of the cost and long-term maintenance of the district. And that's how we handled this situation today. So I think, this one really, had it happened when it was 60 degrees outside, nobody would have known. The building would have held temperature. But in the middle of the night at 7 below, we just can't keep up. The folks that we have working on them, both our custodial folks and our currently our somewhat limited maintenance staff, they do a great job. The custodian in the building called me at 5:45 this morning on my cell phone to tell me there was a problem. They're on top of it. That doesn't mean that our equipment is new or in perfect shape, but people are doing the right things, and I'm comfortable they're doing them well. As to answer your question about what are we doing long term, it varies school by school. The bond, I'll address that very quickly because that's a big subject. We have provided updates periodically to the board. I believe those updates are on the record. In this case, I will tell you that the bond was not designed to address specific boilers, but was intended to address heating problems that came up as we worked through larger infrastructure issues. This one in particular is complicated by several factors. One is, we have a green wood chip boiler that was installed in '95 that has been failing and is problematic for a bunch of reasons, both operationally and regulatory. We're looking at options to put in another boiler, new boiler, second boiler, something perhaps that runs off propane. Those decisions are measured against the developing PCB issue, what's going to happen with the building. So right now, the best we can do, which we are doing, is maintain the equipment in that building as well as we can, and then plan for a backup. So right now, today, we're working on an engineered solution to put in a second backup boiler, with the caveat that we're going to go down the design phase, knowing that's going to take a little bit of time. And if something breaks loose in terms of, you know, the PCB situation or anything else related to the building, we can pull back and reconsider. But it's this kind of interesting combination of the immediacy of maintaining what we have and making the right choices about long-term upgrades and investments. Does that address your kind of, that doesn't go too deep to specifics? If you have specific questions, I'd be happy to address them, but that's kind of a general overview.
No, that's pretty good. Is there a way to have the bond items listed or identified on the website or somewhere so that residents can actually see what was included, so that we can like reference them? Or is there something that could be like posted somewhere?
Yeah, that's a very, very reasonable question.
I mean, we don't need, everything like
No, I
itemized down to a T, because everything changes in cost.
It sure does. Yeah, no, that's a very, very reasonable question. And, you know, the short answer is we absolutely should. The long answer is a question of time and resources. The work that we have done to date has been reported to the board, and I appreciate that's something you have to go look for. I think you know, we would be better served if we had some kind of running report on the website, and I'd love to get that up, and I'd like to say I'll get it up tomorrow. The reality is I'd be lying. So I think it's a great idea, and it's something we should work towards. What I will tell you in the interim is we do have that facilities questions at Hartford Schools email address that goes direct to facilities. In fact, goes direct to my phone for specific questions or general questions. And that's been up for over a year. And I think I've gotten maybe 4 or 5 inquiries. So that is listed on the website for questions. That does not take the place of a regular posted report. It's just a resource if you have specific questions.
There is actually some results on there. I don't think it was updated since 9/30/2025, but on the let me see if I can walk you through it. On the left side of the navigation on the school board page, there's a budget and bond link, and then on the, if you click that on the far right side, there's bond spending to date. Yep.
I have to find that, or I can reach out to you at another time, so don't take up all your night.
Yeah. That's okay.
Can I just say, Heidi, please, you know, feel free, use that email. If you think of something and you want a specific answer, I would rather get lots of questions than have people wondering.
Heidi, would you like, I can email you the link.
Please.
It's a Google sheet. I mean, that the one that Jeremy's talking about. When you click the link, it just opens a Google sheet that basically has a running tally of the bond spending to date. I think what you just have view access like everybody else, but I can email it to you right now if that helps.
It would just be nice to know what was like approved and like kind of an itemization of like some of the items that have been addressed and where we kind of stay. I mean, it doesn't have to be exact, but at least an idea of what's been addressed or what you're looking at to address, just so we have an idea and where we're standing and, you know, what you guys are looking at to address coming up.
So this idea is just a summary of the bond spending to date, as Jeremy was saying. It doesn't have like the entire list of all the things that we had presented last year initially. But I don't see why we can't find that. That's got to be somewhere on the site, probably almost a year ago. But
We'll make sure that gets put on the budget portion with the big asterisk, you know, subject to change as, you know, we kind of start to figure out stuff. But I can absolutely upload the, like, you know, the tentative original plan that we had built that bond on.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate this. Thank you. So people are asking online, is school going to be on tomorrow, or are you guys calling it, or is it going to be a late start?
So, not to, well, I was about to say not to jump in, but I just did. I can tell you right now, Heidi, I'm actually looking at the building automation graphics from the school. The boiler is up to temperature. The classrooms are back at approaching their set point temperatures. There's absolutely no reason to expect we won't be in school as normal tomorrow. The permanent replacement part, like I said, is getting overnighted from Kansas and will arrive tomorrow morning. We'll be able to replace that with a temporary shutdown. You know, one of those temporary shutdowns that I alluded to earlier, where nobody in the building will even know we do it. We'll
Right.
take the boiler offline for 45 minutes, put in a new pump, and be back in business. But
Provided
right
it
now, I
was
literally,
original.
from my laptop can see the temperatures in every room in the high school, and we're in good shape right now.
Positive. Just keep
And
thinking positive.
I'll just add to Heidi that I don't send messages about when we are in session because I find that sows a lot of confusion. So, you know, in that regard, it's no news is good news.
Sounds good to me. Well, thank you for giving me the time and allowing me to ask my questions and actually answering them. So I do appreciate this.
Well, thanks for waiting.
Oh, you have to be patient in this world. Thank
you,
you.
Heidi.
Sure. Is there anyone else from the public that wants to have any comments? If not, the board has one comment that we would like to have read. Jeremy or Kathy, did
I
either
got
one
it.
of you? You got it?
Oh.
Good.
The
Thank-
motion
Pardon
to go
me?
in, yeah. To go into the executive session?
No. To read the letter? To read the note
Do you
from
see
board?
the regarding MLK Day?
Yes.
Yeah.
Kathy, do you have it? Go ahead,
I
yeah.
do. Okay, let me just
Thanks,
give me-
Kathy.
make it bigger. Okay. Pull it up here. Dear Hartford community members, we understand and acknowledge that there are concerns about the way in which we approached Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day this year, and that we held an in-service day for educators instead of having a day of no school for both educators and students. This is when intent and impact converge, and we are grateful to those of you who contacted us to help us reveal when the convergence does not lead to the hope that we had that this was a thoughtful and intentional way to approach this day. The development and adoption of a district calendar is a considerable undertaking that involves the vetting and approval by many different teams, and in our case, because of our sending schools to the Hartford Area Career and Technical Center, approval by a regional board and the Hartford Board of School Directors. When the school year 25-26 calendar was approved over a year ago, it would have been challenging to predict the current political and social tech context and climate, which demands that we are even more thoughtful and purposeful about the way in which we support our most vulnerable community members. Our intention was to engage in a day of professional learning and service together on behalf of the students who we work with, particularly those who are most marginalized. In an interview with a reporter in 1961, Dr. King reflected on the somebodyness his mother instilled in him and how that carried through his life and into his work. Our hope for the day was that we are connecting our curriculum to the Vermont education quality standards, which infuses the equity work we have been focused on into the curriculum across the district, and that we are also being mindful of how this work is aligned to our vision of a graduate, ensuring that our students are truly experiencing the connection we are making to their lived lives, providing them with relevant, authentic experience, and fostering their view of themselves as somebody. We can only grow when we receive feedback, and we know that it takes courage among our community members to reach out to us and to let us know of the hurt and harm that was caused by engaging in work on this day. The only acceptable response is to listen, learn, reflect, repair, and do better. This week, we will be reviewing the calendar for next school year and with a thoughtful approach to revision to ensure that we are considerate and reflective of the concerns that have been raised. Thank you all for your thoughtful feedback and for your support. Sincerely, the Hartford School District and the Hartford Board of School Directors.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Consent agenda. Appointments, resignations, or retirements, Katie? None.
None at this time.
Okay. And do I have a motion to accept the agenda of the no appointments, resignations, and retirements and the meeting minutes of January the 14th, 26? Oh,
So moved.
do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Jeremy, now you can do the
All right.
executive
I move that the board find that discussion of labor relations agreements with employees falls within the exception of the open meeting law under 1 VSA section 313A1. As such, discussion would involve confidential labor relations matters and premature public disclosure could place the board at a substantial disadvantage in negotiations and adversely affect the interest of the public body.
And do we have a second to go in motion? A second for the motion?
Second.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Okay, it is approved.
Okay, I move that the board enter executive session pursuant to 1 VSA section 313A1 to discuss labor relations agreements with employees as premature public disclosure of the matters to be discussed would clearly place the board at a substantial disadvantage.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. And the motion carries. I have 7:38. Is that the same
That's
time
what I got.
everybody else has? And then if Kevin hops in, he can finish up with us. Is that okay with everyone?
Mm-hmm.
I think so.
Okay, I'm going to call the meeting back to order. We came out of executive session at 8:15 and with no
Any
action.
action?
No. Next board meeting is going to be the 4th of February. Do we have someone who would like to do the meeting evaluation? There he is. Hi, Kevin.
Let me see if it's in the packet. No, that's not it.
You'd think we all had that memorized by now, wouldn't you?
I know.
Might be able to recycle one.
Can we just say satisfactory across the board and call it?
I think I have a old packet here.
That's what I'm looking for. Just have it saved on my hard drive now.
It's just your background on your computer.
Right. That's where the motions are.
Here, I have it.
You got it?
Thanks, Kathy.
Board meeting monitoring. The board was prepared for the meeting, satisfactory. The board's time was spent on ends, not means, satisfactory. Each board member was given an opportunity to participate, satisfactory. Board treated all persons with courtesy and fairness, satisfactory. Board adhered to Robert's Rules of Order, satisfactory. Board adhered to its adopted governance style, satisfactory. It emphasized outward vision. It encouraged diversity in viewpoints and exercised strategic leadership, not administrative detail. It maintained distinction between board and staff roles. It used collective decision-making. It looked to the future. All satisfactory.
Thank you.
Word.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Okay, no need for a second. Garrett, it's Nancy. Thanks. You did a great job on your monitoring report. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
We will take notes of what we need to be doing better. Good night, everyone.
All right, guys, thank you.
Right.
Good night.